Good morning, everybody. My name is Winifred Adams, and I'm your host here at Making Life Brighter Radio. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have a very special presentation today. And here with us today, we have some very important intel, and the intel shapes and frames what's going on in Operation Epic Fury. It also speaks back to exactly what's been going on in the war theater and in the history of the war theater that we're looking at right now. And I call it a war theater because it is technically involving many countries, and it may yet involve more countries. But to understand the basis of this, we are going to again speak with return guest, retired Army Centcom Intelligence Agent, William G. Kotel. Welcome back, William.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here and coming to speak about this particular situation, especially today. Many people are disturbed by what's going on and are confused as to what's going on, because we also have a situation currently in our government where Homeland Security is shut down, and people are trying to debate back and forth exactly what's going on. So I would like you to lend to this particular overview of what's happening, and then we're going to get into the specifics of your mandamus, what that meant, your position within that theater back when Benghazi happened, because it speaks to today. So, William, I'd like you to give us a framework right out the door of what you see happening today in the Middle East.
Well, thank you for letting me explain this. So let me just do this chronologically, and I'll try not to take too much time, but I'm going to have to jump from certain years forward. Back in 2007, 2008, I was with the 101st, and we were in Baghdad, Iraq. And during that time, there was a gentleman by the name of Rafi Isawi, a Sunni, who was the Minister of Finance in Iraq. And he was receiving all monies from the U.S. for provincial reconstruction to basically rebuild Iraq from the United States. All of the money that was given in basically hand receipt form from the State Department to the Iraqi government. All these hand receipts were stored in the Central Bank of Iraq on the 12th floor specifically. Mr. Isawi decided to abscond with 12 billion US dollars, and he ordered his Colonel Rad, as head of his PSD, to burn the 12th floor of the Central Bank of Iraq, and that burned the 12th through the 16th floor. That was a Central Bank of Iraq fire. We did arrest him. We did bring him to a trial, and the State Department terminated Isawi's involvement in the trial, stating his macroeconomic policies, according to Treasury, were too important. We did convict Colonel Rad, but we didn't convict Isawi. Now, Isawi shipped some of the money, $394 million, directly to Denmark. But a lot of the money, not all of it, but a lot of the balance of the money was sent to banks in Brazil, which I found odd. That's the first scenario. The second scenario from 2007, 2008, that's important to set the stage, were the Iraqi elections. We were tasked as a unit to go down and oversee the Iraqi elections. And at the time, Iran sponsored Jaish al-Mahdi through Muqtada al-Sadr from Sadr City to start sponsoring people which were called the Fedai. They weren't Saddam's guys. The Fedai were 60,000 Shia families kicked out of Iraq during the Iran-Iraq war back in the 80s. And at the time of 2007, 2008, they had turned into approximately 500,000 voting-aged males that Iran shipped across the border to influence elections for 2008 to make most of the districts turn Shia from Sunni. What this did is this inundated a lot of districts with a lot of different people. What saved everybody back then was an Iraqi ID card called a jinsiyah. The jinsiyah meant that you were born in a certain province or certain district and that you had to vote in that district. If you did not have a jinsiyah, you could not vote in that district. If you had a phony jinsiyah, you still had to vote in the district it was assigned to. So we did stop a lot of the fraud in the elections in 2008, which is a critical thing to keep in mind. If we jump forward then to 2010, Rafi Isawi was one of the only Sunni in the government of Iraq, where a lot of Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Dubai, Kuwait, Qatar, a lot more, were all supportive of him. But Prime Minister Maliki, who was a Shia, had already inundated and changed most of the government, all of the military leadership, the national police leadership, and the Iraqi police leadership to Shia, which was Iranian supported. This was a very bad indication. This was under President Obama. Now, I mean, I can understand Obama's, you know, concern with the Sunni because most Al Qaeda at the time were Sunni. So maybe that was a reason, but I'm not going to dwell into any other reasons that I know of why he would promote the changing of Sunni to Shia throughout the region, causing problems and destabilizing the region. So as of 2010 to 2012, before the next election in the United States for President Obama to become second termer, Rafi Assawi was being hunted to be arrested by Prime Minister Maliki. The reason was he was trying to get access to that money. Coincidentally, Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, was invited in 2012 to Iraq and did abscond with over 400 million US dollars we know of. There's unofficial figures up to 800 million. And that money was also sent to banks in Brazil. This became basically a pattern, a trend that we were seeing. And I don't know why no one was acting upon this.
It's
Well,
really interesting that you could watch this in real time, and yet it was just allowed to happen. But we'll get into that's the same for Shannon's story too. But go ahead, please.
well, in 2012, this is where everything escalated beyond the norms. Okay. We had the election of the president of the United States, who had taken out bin Laden in that year to support and promote his election. We were also given orders from General Mattis, the head of Centcom at the time, not to report on any Sunni-led attacks, which meant Al Qaeda, Ansar al-Sunni, and other Sunni-type attacks. We were basically saying they were not existent, they weren't happening, even though they were. And at this time, also, the Sunni were becoming so disenfranchised with what was happening in the country of Iraq and in other parts of the Middle East that this became a real problem to them. When the attempted arrest of Assawi took place, 14 Middle Eastern countries that were Sunni-based protested. Some threatened to go in and take him out. When I was at CENTCOM, I could not make them action Assawi. But my mission that I had put together, I'll tell you the unclassified portions of it, were to basically go and retrieve Assawi, get him to roll over on all the Al-Qaeda folks he knows, give us back our money, and tell us what Iran and Ahmadinejad, the former president, who's a Iranian and a Shia, were doing with the money and what was going on in Brazil with that money. I had worked out an arrangement with the State Department. They were communicating with the ambassador in Iraq, and we had a communication with other agencies to be able to extract him because we had already pulled out, because that's when General Austin got his fourth star by pulling us out of there and leaving everything that you saw ISIS floating around with. And in 2012, of course, then the big thing kicked off, which was Benghazi. And Benghazi took place. Ambassador Stevens was not killed of smoke asphyxiation. He was killed after being dragged around and brutalized for 30 minutes. They brought him to a hospital, and the doctor there only could sustain life for 30 minutes, and he expired at that point. And no security elements during that time were allowed to go in. I was sitting at CENTCOM. We were in what's called a big training exercise called Internal Look 12. 75% of CENTCOM here and in other locations, even overseas, were at work. Nobody who was involved with the training exercise was allowed to cease and desist to address the Benghazi issue. We were told the State Department was going to have it under control. And then that same time when Benghazi went off, what people don't remember is our embassy in Cairo, Egypt was overrun by the, I guess, the Muslim Brotherhood. If you want to call it the Muslim Brotherhood, that's fine. But we had just seen a regime change where President Mubarak was removed by this guy, Abu Morsi, who was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. And when our embassy was overrun, the Marines were ordered to stow their weapons and allow the Morsi Brotherhood to regain control. And a short time after that, thank God for General al-Sisi, who became the president. He took back the country, and he's a Sunni. But all of this was taking place during this election year. It was horrific how much was going on. And at that moment, we had also lost the country of Yemen. Now, Yemen is a Sunni-based country, but these Houthi rebels that are Shia and they're backed by Iran were in Yemen. Saudi Arabia has been in active conflict against the Houthi rebels for many years now. And we weren't doing anything. We had State Department personnel stuck in Yemen that couldn't take off from the airport unless they paid the air traffic controller to allow them to take off after this whole Houthi invasion at that point in time in 2012.
This
So
is
all of it, go ahead.
a common theme. So at that time, before you continue, we're going to take a break in a few minutes, but at that time, who was really calling the shots at the top that you now know? Now as you look back on that, what do you think was going on?
I think the executive branch was calling shots. I can't say it was Obama directly, but I mean, people in the executive branch were making the decisions to do the things they did. I mean, Hillary Clinton was the State Department, DOS, Secretary of State. She didn't do anything about Benghazi, nor was Egypt even listed as an issue. But you can talk with Laura Lohan because she was beaten up and raped during that overtake of our embassy, like 4 blocks from the embassy. And when you look at all that took place and the fact that the Treasury Department shut my mission down again in 2012, in 2013, you saw the creation of ISIS. Now, ISIS was created by a lot of people who tell you a lot of different things. What I saw from facts that I've seen, and I'm not saying I'm the right guy, but I'm just saying that the Sunni were so disenfranchised that Iraq had turned totally Shia and Iranian dominant, and that so many others had turned that way, that they just decided to fight back, and they created ISIS by doing that. So
Interesting.
that's my take on it.
Was that the sentiment across the board, or is that your personal opinion of it?
No, that was pretty well understood by a lot of people, but we were ordered not to speak about that. We weren't even allowed to bring it up in 2012. But if we change gears for 1 minute and we look at this money that was sent down to Brazil, you're talking about Sunni-backed Al Qaeda at the time and Shia-backed Hezbollah, Hamas, Shining Path, and others had all this money in Brazil, which they could use, and I put this out many times, they could use to pay these different cartels and other corrupt personnel to move up north toward the American borders, the United States borders. And with doing that, they paid for it. So in 2013, it was no surprise that ISIS was flying flags in the Juarez cartel's domain, 1 mile south of El Paso, Texas, which was all over the news. But
Right.
not one official was responding to any of these complaints. And the other thing that was very interesting under President Obama, his only orders for South and Central America were interdiction on the high seas of narcotics trafficking. He did not get involved at all with any of these South and Central American countries, which was ridiculous because if you remember that idiot Edward Snowden, that he said, oh, I put all this classified stuff out, and the only people that would listen to him is some magazine or newspaper guy out of Brazil. The administration did nothing to really slam the guy or put him in jail. He put out a bunch of baloney. I mean, he was an idiot.
Well, we're going to just take a quick break and we're going to come back and continue this conversation. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and we are deep in it about the intel that surrounds Iran today and the entire Middle East. We're here today with William G. Kotel. He is retired Centcom intelligence agent, and we're going to continue this. We also have another special guest. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams. Today, we have a very special show, an episode with retired Army Centcom Intelligence Agent William G. Kotel. And we have special guests upcoming, Shannon Dee Revit, and she was a retired major, and she was also someone that had ears on the ground, and she was put through unbelievable rigor and is here to speak about it for the first time ever today. So, William, we're going to jump right back in because you were talking about the stolen monies and how they got put into Brazil. Let's go back to your thought about Snowden and then those monies.
Well, I was just making a point that Snowden should have been slammed. And even if he wasn't arrested, they should have put out better information to show that what he stated was just a lot of garbage and it wasn't really malleable. But if we fast forward from that time period of 2012, 2013, a little bit, and I'll skip the whole congressional thing that I did with Benghazi, and we move to the Biden administration. In the Biden administration, you saw lots and lots and lots of people crossing the border, okay? And that all stemmed from Venezuela, which kicked off in 2017. And I've been screaming warning bells about this Maduro guy and all his dudes and what they represent. I mean, and because of Obama's hands off in the South and Central American countries, Biden placated the same thing. And nobody was really reassuring Colombia and Nicaragua and Costa Rica and other countries about the fact that we can help them with these immigration problems that Maduro created. Once these problems were created, then everybody from around the globe could just jump in on these caravans and bandwagons and roll into the US. You're talking Chinese spies, terrorists from all different groups. You can name them. They're going to be jumped in there. And there was no action to officially stop that process of going across the border. So now when you look at President Trump's second term here now, he's having to deal with all the immigration issues. He's got to deal with there's a couple of knuckleheads at CPB that they're making big news about. Some of these people in Congress, they shouldn't be even in the United States. They should be other countries because how much they hate us, apparently. And you can see overseas, this whole issue with Iran really does take center stage and was coming for a long time. And these student protests that they've done a fantastic job in protesting, God save all those that have, fell during this protest period. But they're now much stronger, and worldwide, Iranians are much stronger. So we have Venezuela that's been partially liberated, and now we have Iran that's being liberated, and a lot of that supported terrorist activity around the world is going to come to a halt. People are saying stop this thing, but really this was a long time in coming, and now it's time to deal with this matter at hand. And I'll let you go forward with your next thoughts.
Well, thank you. It seems to me that it's always the money trail, and you were watching that move. So whatever happened after that with that great amount that got shifted, and why would it go to Brazil exactly?
Well, it was going into Brazil. There was something that's classified that was happening down there, but the whole thing is during that time period of 2011, 2012, even 2010, there were things happening in Brazil that we weren't happy with. And then the whole thing with Snowden, that took place in Brazil. So none of the Brazilians trusted anyone in America. They thought we were watching every email, text message, listening to every phone call, you name it. And it was just ridiculous. And it was not put into its place. So it allowed for this anti-American sentiment to go forward. The money was being used to propagate groups like Al-Qaeda at the time, and then turning into ISIS and other groups like Hezbollah or Hamas to move forward through South and Central America to get up on the U.S. border. And as I stated, they had their flags flying, ISIS flags, in the Juarez cartel. And what's so weird is the Juarez cartel was actually taken over by what was called the Mexican Auto Defense League in 2013. They were a group of citizens that fought back against the cartels. And the second in charge, don't know his name, but his AKA was Papa Smurf, had his president put into jail. Then the Minister of Defense issued them weapons. Then they took over the Juarez cartel, and now they're the worst cartel on the planet. And the Mexican government traditionally has always worked with the strongest cartel. It used to be Sinaloa, now it's Juarez. And this whole mess that took place with this recent events with another cartel involved, it signals there's a big shift that they don't want to get involved. It's bad for business. But what Juarez was doing is they were working with ISIS, but they also were working with Hezbollah and Hamas. And as I stated in previous interviews, they don't understand. These guys don't care what money they spend or not. If you know who they are and you're a threat, they'll blow you up. That's the way they work. Cartels didn't care. They were like, hey, we're making money, and this is again another piece of a security threat to the United States that's really not been addressed until President Trump came in his second tour, and that's being addressed partially. Again,
Well, I had told you, we've covered a lot of ground here on Making Life Brighter, you and I, and in bringing these things forward. And William's always been on the forefront of everything. It's true. And he has had great influence, albeit silently behind the scenes. But people don't want to put him on because they don't want the story told. Why is that? However, we did have a conversation a few years ago under the Biden administration that the most prolific and dangerous drug trafficker was out of the Middle East. And he was actually caught after a huge mission to go and get him and extract him out of his compound. They extradited him back to the United States. They imprisoned him. And under the Biden administration, unlawfully, he was released just recently, put back out. So this speaks to what you were talking about, because he actually controlled the entire Middle East with all that. So we'll get into that later, but I want to introduce everyone to Shannon Dee Revit. And Shannon, welcome, and thank you for being with us today. You're a retired major. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your rank, because what you have to say for the first time today is not only important to what William was saying, but it corroborates the entire framework of what he just said. So tell us how you got started into your military career and where you ended up.
I joined 2 months after 9/11. My son was 4, and I had always wanted to join. I come from a long line of military family, and I finally decided, you know what, I'm not going to just talk about protecting my country. I'm going to show my son. And so I started off in the Navy. I just so happened to be introduced to somebody who was in the Navy. And so I started off as an aviation machinist mate. I worked on the C-9B SkyTrain 2, which looks very much like Air Force One. And I started out as E2. I ended up working up to the rank of E5, and then the whole time I was using the GI benefits, and I decided to go into nursing. And so when Willow Grove NASJRB was mostly BRAC'd, I jumped over to the Air Force side because I had met my husband, and we decided go over to the Air Force side. And long story short, I ended up getting a commission, and I landed in the Delaware Air National Guard and worked my way up to major. But when I was a captain, I had just gone from being a nurse, and I had just earned my master's degree as a nurse practitioner. And I was still working eventually, while I was deployed, I was working actually to get my doctorate, which I did earn. But one of the lieutenant colonels called me and said, hey, we need somebody to take a 6-month deployment to Africa. And it was a split deployment to Ethiopia. We had, if you Google, there was a drone base there that was wasn't a very good secret, but it wasn't well known at all. And it was down in Arbaminch, Ethiopia. And the second half of the deployment was going to be in Djibouti to kind of reorganize and get well running an Air Force clinic. So I went down as the director of medical services as we were taking down this drone base. You know, people have a tendency to get hurt, and there's we had I had to evac a guy who got really sick, and I hearkened back to my Navy days, and I ended up bringing in a C-130 under cover of darkness with nothing but a glow stick, and that was pretty interesting because that story went all the way around the world. And my brother was sitting in a meeting one night, and some guy brought it up, and my brother was like, "Wait, I'll tell you the punchline," and he said she landed it with a glow stick. And the guy's like, "How do you know?" And my brother was like, "Well, that was
Fantastic.
my sister." So I still have that glow stick today. But as things got to get closer, the then prime minister had been in an election, and this was in 2014 into 2015. So I landed there in October of 2015. The then prime minister was in a heated election, and on their national radio, he had been challenged that the Americans who were down in southern Ethiopia, meaning us, were really the ones that were running the country. And just like William said, in Venezuela and in Brazil, especially, they're people, when you are in their country, they'll either treat you as a guest or they're going to treat you as suspicious. Now, until then, we were pumping up their economy and they loved us until they were challenged on national radio. Now they were like the Brazilians and they were very suspicious of us. So he, right then and there, without thinking, was like, "You know what? I'm telling them to leave." So they loved us till they hated us. And as the drawdown date got closer, which was our contracts for vehicles, drivers. We lived amongst the people in their local lodge. All of that with food, everything went dark on December 12th. As that got closer, people went from waving and loving us to like you could feel the distinct shift, and like they really did not like us. There was a priest there called Father Patty. He had us over for dinner, and he told us, "Just leave all your stuff behind. Leave your pallets, leave your clothes, leave your bags. Get the heck out of here because there's an ambush planned. They're going to kill you." And that ambush, they were about a quarter mile from the public lodge that we were staying at, that we were paying for guards to keep us separate. And they had shoulder RPGs and all kinds of weapons. And it was by the hand of God that we weren't killed. Within that time frame, within 2 weeks, most of our leadership left and they went off to Niger and other places that they were going. And on the date that we were all supposed to leave, I told them the only thing I want is the weapons, the medical supplies, and some of the other important stuff to go on the second C-17 with me. And so they were like, "Okay," except things went sideways. The representatives from the Ethiopian government showed up that morning who had already cleared our weapons, and everything was accounted for. And as William can tell you, they wanted a payoff. They wanted to take some of our weapons. And the Ethiopian Force Protection, who was they had their main headquarters right next to our base, which was a pad. It was like 1 acre of concrete with barbed wire around it. They were there to back them up. So before things went to serious fisticuffs, because we thought it was, they flipped the cargo around, and the first plane left, and it left with all the important people. Our Office of Special Investigation, who were our ears on the ground. It left with all the weapons, all the medical supplies, anything we would have needed, like every single weapon. And off they went into the sky. And we're like, "All right, no problem." And the other plane's going to be here in half an hour from, we called it Addis, but it's Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia. Except the plane didn't come. It
Okay,
broke down.
so we're going to take a quick break. You're going to be on the seat, listening, waiting for this final story because it's amazing. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And you can hear the rest of Shannon's story and why this is so important and how it speaks to the framework as I'm talking about, because this is her sharing for the first time ever about this story, and we thank you for having the courage to do so. We'll be right back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio. Stay tuned, everybody. We have much more today. Stay tuned. We're back. We're here on Making Life Brighter Radio today, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams. We have special return guest, retired Army Centcom Intelligence Agent William G. Kotel, and he is frameworking why this is going on today and what's been going on in the history all the way back to Benghazi and before that in Iran and around the world. And today we also have a special guest for the first time ever, Major Shannon Dee Revit, and she is retired also, but she was recounting her story of how she got left behind at a drone base in Africa. So please, Shannon, continue and tell us how you got out of there. What happened when they left you behind?
So there were 24 of us. We went back, felt like our tail between our legs back to the lodge. I'm sure you can imagine how it felt to go back when you were so happy you were getting out of there. And suddenly we all went back to the lodge. We were ordering our lunch, and I had always treated them well. My lunch came, a lot of the others didn't. And all of a sudden, one of the guys came back and said, "Security forces, grab your gear." And they decided to put all the security forces guys on a commercial plane and take them. So all of them went. They left like 2 or 3 of them with us, and they well, I won't say anything about that, but they all left. That was what AFRICOM did. They decided they had to go. They had their hard return date on their deployment, so they left, and they left 11 of us there unarmed and without any weapons and no protection.
And what did you feel in that moment? What did you do?
I felt very much left behind, and all of us were terrified. And one of the young guys came up to me, and we went to regroup. And the guy who was the major had just landed 2 weeks before. He's thinking it's Gilligan's Isle. He had no idea what the transition felt like. They loved us till they hated us. He wasn't picking up the vibe yet. And he was still at the, seeing them off, waving goodbye, with lays and stuff. And one of the young guys said to me, "Hey, Doc, this isn't going to be another Benghazi, is it?" And I said, "Don't even say that word. Not one of you. Don't say that word. We're going to get out of here." And they said, "Well, if things go sideways, you're going to egress us out of here." I said, "You bet your ass I will." What ended up happening was every day they would tell us, and this has been going on for weeks and weeks, they kept setting up when the plane was going to come. And there was 3 different people who kept playing chess. They didn't like when the plane was going to come. You can't have them both come on the same day. No, one can come in the morning, one can come in the afternoon. No, they have to go on separate days. So there were 3 different people who kept changing the date. So once you give up that slot, the Joint Operation Command gives up the slot, and now you move 1 day closer to our drop down date when we lost all of our contracts with everything. And theoretically, we also lost our visas, so they could have arrested us. So that was causing a tremendous amount of stress for all of us anyway. So we knew that we were at that date. Everything had expired, so they could have come at any time and arrested us or killed us. They had already tried to ambush us. So they had played a lot of games, which is too long to get into on this, but 2 of the things they did, they saw me as the de facto commander because I had been there the longest. There were only 2 of us officers. The other one had just got there, and he really didn't know the lay of the land. I had been there longest. I was very high visibility as being the head of medical. I was going to Arvaments University Hospital every other day. So they all knew me in the town. The one day I was sitting in the restaurant, I had a couple of my guys behind me, and I ordered the same thing I always ordered. And all of a sudden I look up, and there's all the other hotel workers, like you're talking housekeeping, the people that did the wash for the other, like people on the public side, maintenance, all these other people, and they're lined up against the wall, and they're snickering, and they're talking amongst themselves, and they're crossing their arms, and they're staring at me. And I'm like, what are that? Like, I've never seen them do that. What is going on? And I went to take a bite of my rice, and it's moving.
Oh,
And I'm like, what in the, and I look and there's a pile of mud with live and dead bugs in it.
oh,
And then I thought back to my SEER training and I thought, this is a test. They want to see if I'm the weakest link. If I if I don't eat this and I freak out, then I'm the weakest link. And this is a definite cause for them to say, we thought she was the toughest, she's their leader, and now we're going to be able to ambush them again. They'd already been stealing stuff out of our room and they're guarding it. And, I told my guys, don't go near that room. I mean, they ton like boots, like all of our like little knives, everything they had stolen. And I thought, no, I'm not going to be the weakest link. So as they watched, I ate everything on my plate, bugs, mud, live, dead, whatever. And I left a bigger tip than usual. I smiled and I gave him a salute as I went out. And you can imagine what I said in my head. And then when that didn't work, I was seated in a general purpose room and their guys were never allowed in our room ever. And all of a sudden, the head of their security comes walking in, which startled me. And I saw him out of the corner of my eye. He stops and stands right behind me. Now, this is a big room. And then he levels his AK to the back of my head and he starts fingering it, making sure that I knew he was there. And I was unarmed. And I had learned so much in school, the different schools I took before, what to do. But they never said what to do if you're seated unarmed and he's behind you. And I just ignored him and just started talking about what was on the TV. And eventually, what it seemed like a year, eventually
it was
he
literally the
stood
grace
down.
of God that he didn't do that. And
I,
clearly
yeah,
you're protected.
I should be dead. But eventually, the worst part was when our logistics guy, Matthew Fox, he was a master sergeant, comes to us. He was one of only two comm devices that we had because, of course, we took it all down thinking we're leaving. And he comes to us and he was a big guy. He was like, 6'3", all muscle every day, lifting. He came to me in the major and he was white as a sheet. And I said, what's up? He said, I just got off the phone with the White House. And we're like, okay. And he's like, no, the White House. All right. When's the plane coming? Because this has been going on and we were there almost a week. And he's like, I said, all right, what's the message? You are not our priority. Now,
It
if
must
that
have,
didn't feel like Benghazi, I don't know what would. And it was by the grace of God that finally, and I think it had to do a lot with retired General Vavla, who was the tag out of Delaware that made them move to get us out because my sister was screaming so loud in their ear, but he cared a lot about his troops. I think more than any tag that's ever
how long did
been.
it take before you actually got out at that point?
It was late into December 19th. We finally got out. And when I finally got to Djibouti, nobody knew I was coming.
Oh my God. No
Yeah,
wonder. Oh my goodness. Uh, Thank you for having the courage to share that for the first time ever. I know this is hard and we support you here and we thank you for your service and your courage in helping America, truly
thank
helping
you.
America. Same with you, William. Thank you so, so much. William, I'm going to let you step in because I can feel you want to say something.
Well, I want to say I'm sorry you went through that. I think that that was not indicative or, you know, what the Army ethos or the military uh, basically stands for. We always look out for each other. I think that that was a horrific decision that people
I
just
agree.
complied with too well. I mean,
I agree. I think
if
we were 11 scratch marks on the paper to the people that were running it at that moment.
Well, this speaks back to Benghazi and back to what William started with today. William, let's tie it back around to what's actually happening today and how that rogue administration went from illegal arms and money to Benghazi to here we are now back at this place. What's happening?
well, as far as Benghazi goes, just to touch on that a little bit more in depth, when Benghazi kicked off, we continued our training exercise at Centcom with elements of AFRICOM involved for 8.5 hours before other commanders were pulled to actually do some planning. But by that time, Ambassador Stevens and some others were already dead. After Benghazi, when the congressional panel convened, I communicated with them, Trey Gowdy in particular, several times in regards to what really truly took place, why forces weren't there, things of that nature. I was never responded to. Finally, I had a letter sent to me from a Dana Chapman, who I did not know he was a colonel in the Army JAG Corps, but I did not know at the time he had been promoted to general and was still active duty. He sent me a letter and he said, "Thank you for all your involvement in the Benghazi thing." But after having a 30-minute discussion with him on the phone, it was evident that they just wanted to block Hillary Clinton from becoming president. That was the only goal of the commission, not about getting justice for what had happened. After that, I had these individuals that created a 13 Hours movie contact me on a daily basis, along with a former Fox News contributor named Ed Batowski, who is a financial guy, uh, diming me for information. This guy Pronto wanted me even to help him with his VA claim for disability. And they came out and they made up some pretty good stories. They changed their story about how Ambassador Stevens had actually died to changing it to smoke inhalation to go along with the narrative, the theme that was given to them. And of course, they were allowed to produce their movie and they were all, excuse the languages, but supposedly Billy Joe badasses. But the reality is the CIA station chief there had a lot to say about that. And the story changing was very condescending to what Ambassador Stevens' memory was. He was a whistleblower. He was coming out about illegal arms and munitions and weapons and money. That some of it was earmarked for Iraq, that was coming from Iraq over to Libya, and it was like 30 billion is the figure he was going on about. And I don't know the details behind it, but that was what I was told about his background and what he was doing. After this whole Benghazi thing came down, and I was still working at Centcom at that time, there was a lot of talk of just letting it go, let the State Department handle everything from PR to whatever else. But we were still not allowed to report on any Sunni-led attacks, which were Al-Qaeda and others, based off of this gigantic Shia-Sunni change. The Shia were dominating the Middle East, and it was by design, I was told later on, so that the Sunnis couldn't rise up with another Al-Qaeda. And of course, that didn't happen. They came up with ISIS instead, and they were much worse than Al-Qaeda. But this is all the things that took place back then, and you can see the historical trends and the patterns of how everything shifted to Shia. We lost Yemen, we lost Iraq. Iraq and Turkey had a big issue when I was in Iraq in '08 that I had to get involved with and stop through the embassy, which was the Turks were basically damming up the Tigris River, and they were having a lot of snowpack shed melt, which was giving them a great deal of water and basically starving out Iraqi farmers throughout the Tigris region and stifling the water. So we had to get involved with that, have the embassy get up and deal with it. It was a PRT team led by Paul Wetterin, who's a pretty good guy, that was a State Department rep that was directly responsible with another individual I won't name to stop that. But these are the kinds of things that took place. And this whole thing with Erdogan, who's the president of Turkey, again, the whole coup d'etat looked like a stage ruse to allow him more power so he could go ahead and kill more Kurds. It's kind of how it came out.
Well,
And
go ahead.
stifle Greece, not allowing Greece access to things where their economy went bad. And Greece still owns the island of Cyprus, except for the part that Turkey's running with military that produces oil. So, I mean, there's a lot of shifts over there that were going on that were really Iranian backed, and our government was allowing it to happen.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. On that note, we'll be right back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and you can catch the archive on Voice America on the Variety Channel. Look up the host page for Making Life Brighter. And this is such an important show today. We thank everyone that's here and that has all the service members in the world, especially those and those suffering right now. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're listening to Making Life Brighter. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and today we have special guest, retired Centcom Intelligence Agent William G. Kotel, and we have retired Major Shannon Dee Revit, who's telling her story for the first time today. So, William, let's jump back in because we're talking about the World Theater and all the history of it, even back to Benghazi and beyond. So, let's talk about your mandamus and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which we've covered here extensively and exclusively on Making Life Brighter.
Okay, really briefly, the Afghanistan withdrawal was unlawful. It violates Section 2 of the Constitution. It violates so many other federal laws. And I went ahead and during the withdrawal, I had put in Inspector General's complaints in with both the Department of Defense and Department of State. The very same day, the Department of Defense called me to shut the case down. The very next day, 13 soldiers died in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. This was completely illegal and unlawful, and nobody should have followed those unlawful orders. Fast forward a little bit, and you can see that the Iranians had gotten their hands on a lot of equipment left behind by Austin, who used to be my boss, from the Taliban. And that is some of the stuff you're seeing in Iran that's being blown up. Now, I have to say that this has been the most ridiculous of things that has happened. I know President Trump, if he could, he would go back into Afghanistan and correct that wrong. But right now, Pakistan and the Taliban are in an actual active conflict. They're fighting each other with, artillery and everything else you would think of a war. So that would be a good thing to think about now that the Sunni countries are sort of on our side in a lot of this, getting rid of the Iranian regime and trying to right some wrongs from the past that we definitely should never have done.
Interesting. And what is your take on this, Shannon, from your point of view?
Oh, I totally agree with William. I think that, letting the Iranian people, rise up and fix themselves. I always believed in Israel being autonomous, and I think that a lot of the paid actors that they have doing the protests for Palestine, I think that it would be great if they could come up with a solution that makes both sides happy. I think that President Trump is trying to come up with a way to just settle the region down. And I think that it's, definite time that America needs a break from, all of the, things of war. And I think that if he can pull this off, I think that maybe we are going to have a season of peace. And I think that he has better advisors than the ones that we had in the past. And I think William spoke about some of them today. And I think when they're hiding things from people, that's a problem. Sometimes it's good because the problems are too intricate to just throw out to the media dogs to throw up. But I think that we need to undo some of the mistakes that we've made in the past. And, right now we just have a lot of things going on in a lot of different parts of the country. And he still has to keep an eye on China. And of course, Russia, who's now making good with them. And now China has another trading partner with Canada. The world is a bunch of hot spots right now. And if he can pull all this off, that's a pretty amazing feat.
It's an impressive feat. William, what's your take on that?
My take is that President Trump is not going to go beyond 30 days of dealing with Iran. I think it will be less than that to take out most of their significant threats. And I think he's done most of that with Israel. I think that the other Arab countries that are there that are Sunni-led, like Jordan, Egypt, Oman, Qatar, Dubai, I think some will actually be involving themselves in the conflict. Some will support the conflict because they were also struck. It's another way that Iran shows its authority by saying we only support Shia. And if you're a Sunni-led country, then you're with the Americans and you all die. So I think this is all going to be done, not in a specific time date, but in a short amount of time. I don't believe President Trump wants to go beyond that, especially with what's been going on. There's other hotspots, as she's indicated, that need to be addressed. And some of those don't have to do with war. They have to do with economics.
What are those?
Well, dealing with China and their economy as far as they go, China used to be more scared of Janet Yellen under President Biden than anybody else in the world. And why? Because Janet Yellen had the ability to call in the Chinese markers of money they owe us. So that's what scared them more than anything. For China, it's all about the money. They're getting Russian oil for equipment. Obviously, you see that equipment is in Iran and it's not quite working well. But, that's exactly what's taking place right now. So you're
Well,
seeing.
To go back and speak to what you said about the unlawful withdrawal of Afghanistan and the seizing of our equipment or the just leaving it behind, and now we see it kind of scattered about. Where have you seen it recently?
It's been not just in Afghanistan. You've seen some in Iran. You actually saw some of it in the Hamas's hands in fighting the Israelis after they did the illegal killings on October 7th and the illegal invasion. You're also seeing it in certain parts of North Africa. So the Taliban sold a lot of stuff they didn't want. And we left not just equipment, we left sensitive items, we left classified material, but the most important thing we left is we left people. We took 124,000 people out of Afghanistan here. Only 20,000 had been vetted, but we left our own citizens in Afghanistan. And you have congressmen and senators going out, getting money donations to hire private contracting Merc companies to go in and rescue these people. And you also had the canine issue, which you were
Right.
definitely, you were way into that. So the canines were also left there. And those service dogs, there's nothing better than a canine to help you clear buildings or to deal with bad guys. They are a gem, and to leave them behind is catastrophic. But, again, there was not much of a choice in the way that that withdrawal was done. An unlawful time frame was put on it. The withdrawal was from a bad air base. The number one in Al-Qaeda at the time, which used to be the number two, was sitting right there outside one of the gates. There was pictures of him the day before, and the next day it's when the bombs went off and our service members died. It was fascinating to see how nobody really got involved to stand up and say, these are unlawful orders. Austin knew they were. General Milley knew they were. Hell, I knew Milley when he was lieutenant colonel. I thought he was pretty good guy. Turns into, this, I don't know what he turned into. I mean, cream puff? I don't know what you want to call him. But
Turned into a yes man is what he turned into. He was an embarrassment.
Well, he maybe got paid. Maybe he got paid to do something different.
You got to ask yourself, as an adult that's already been through your career, at what point is enough enough? Enough lying, enough ass kissing, or enough of following unlawfulness? Well, at what point do you stop that? I mean, what are you scared of? At that point, you shouldn't be scared of anything. It's ridiculous.
Well, in speaking to the mandamus that you put out and all that you've been through, William, he has been fighting for everybody, and they chunked his case. They wouldn't see it. They wouldn't read it. They refused it. We've talked about that. Please go back to the archives here on Making Life Brighter, especially in December, and you can hear William's show on that, and he goes into it extensively. You can read the mandamus at makinglifebrighter.com, and I really highly suggest that you do. This man has been ahead of the curve all the way along. We've showcased him here proudly, and I'd like to shout out again for his service, and his other service is helping veterans on a regular basis. So he's standing for the truth for the people, and he is standing for other veterans. So I'd like to say thank you publicly again. Thank you, William.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank you for
insights
helping
today.
other veterans. It's a battle for a lot of people out there.
Shannon, and we just have a few minutes left. You've been through it. We have 1 minute here. So you've been through the rigor of trying to get the help that you need through the veteran system, and it doesn't work too easily, as you found out, right?
Exactly. And I've created a suicide prevention program for the military that is plug and play to the DoD, schools, communities. It is so simple, it's ridiculous. One of the original cartoonists on the Batman cartoon helped me draw the patch. I cannot get anyone who has any authority to listen to it, and I want to give it to our country. I want to give it to the military. Anyone I've shared it with in the military is like, sign me up, I want to volunteer. And it's based on volunteerism, and it's not a voluntold, it's a volunteer. And I know that it will save people. So if there's anyone listening who knows anyone with any authority, whether it be in Congress or high up in the military, give me 10 minutes and I'm going to sell you on it.
Thank you.
But yeah,
Thank
and
you
if
for
you,
coming and
yeah,
telling your story today, Shannon. Go ahead,
yeah,
finish what you're
and
going to say.
don't give up. If what you're trying with this program or that or the VA doesn't work, don't give up. Just keep trying. Just it's a patchwork. It's not a pill.
Thank
It's
you
not one
both.
program. It's a patchwork. You got to pull yourself up and out. No one's going to do it for you.
Great messages. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being here today. We'll continue this conversation, and even with your husband, Shannon. Thank you so much, Major Shannon Dee Revit, and of course, retired Army Centcom Intelligence Agent William G. Kotel, and he has been on the forefront of all this information. Thank you for being here today on Making Life Brighter. Go jolly, everybody. Go out and make someone else's life brighter. Thank you for listening, and please share.